If you haven't seen my channel lately, I had to schedule an emergency rest period. I had to take a half a week off the bike because I was starting to get overcooked from all the sweet spot work I was doing, and that was only a week and a half into my sweet spot block. And second, I had to take a whole week off of doing squats and deadlifts because I had tweaked my back just a little bit during my max squat test day. So I figure this is a great time to do an FTP test. A cycling community, this is Steve Grusis, the Cycling Greek. The first week of my sweet spot block, I had done a couple of sweet spot sessions. Now last Saturday, I went out with my teammate William, and we did about 3+ hours of paceline work. And that wore me down. So I was going to do something Sunday. Could have been more sweet spot, could have been just steady tempo endurance, but I wasn't feeling it. In fact, I was feeling like I needed to take a rest. So I took the day off. And pretty much that day probably would have been good enough. But I decided to just extend the time off, get a little mental freshness too maybe, and that's what I did. Tuesday, I went out for my first dirt ride in 2, maybe 3 decades.
Yeah, get up there.
And that was fun. And it was, like 10 miles, and my legs were, they were fresh, they were fine. The next big thing that I did was a Zwift crit on Thursday. That was going to be a little bit of a test because that was going to show me how I can do in a Category B crits rested. 2 days later was my FTP test, and I was going to do it in the middle of a group ride. I'd done it in the middle of a group ride years ago, and that was a bit of a challenge, and I'd say I'd never do that again, but here I was doing it again. And this time there were only 2 of us, my teammate Eric and myself.
I get cold coming down hills.
Well, I'm hoping by then we'll be close to the high of 59, which we won't.
I highly doubt that. That's a prayer.
59 is going to be like at 4 o'clock or something, right?
That's going to be answered today.
So after my FTP test was done, we continued with our ride, and we did more paceline work. And I was able to survive that, good enough. I was worn out when I got back to the car, but I wasn't dying during the ride, so that was good. So the FTP test. I did it on an upward undulating course. There was a lot of uphills, obviously, but there was also a little bit of downhills, a little bit of false flat, and then false incline flat, we'll call it that way. It's easier for me to hold a steady effort on a steady course, let's say. If I'm going on the flats into the wind, or if I'm going on a climb, that's nice and steady. If I'm doing it with a tailwind, then it gets a bit harder for me. And I've done my sweet spots, some of them were in tailwinds, and I was able to hold the right wattage, but I could tell it's just because of maybe how I am and the training I've done, it was just a little bit harder to do. So I ended up with having a average wattage, in a 20-minute FTP, not the 1 hour FTP, but a 20-minute FTP of 280 watts. And that's the highest it's been for me in quite a few years. Previously, I've been around 270, 275. So being the off season and being at 280 at this point, that makes me feel pretty good. And I know I still have some more watts in me that I can put out there. Interesting to note that my FTP on ZwiftPower.com is 265 watts, and that is going to be a 1 hour FTP. To back calculate, that'll be 95% of what the 20-minute FTP is. So basically, I'll take 5% of 265, and that's going to be 13 1/4, and I'm going to add it to that, and so that's going to be right around just a little over 278.25 watts. And that's obviously real close to the 280 watts. So now that I had a good FTP test, what am I going to do now? Well, today's Sunday, and rather than go out on the road and just do an endurance ride, I got on my cross bike and went back to the dirt again. Did about 10 miles, met up with some former teammates, rode with them a little bit, came back home, and got on the weights. I can still feel it in my back a little bit, so I'm changing things up quite a bit. Rather than do my standard squats, I am working on my form, and I'm actually changing it a little bit, at least for the interim until things totally heal up on my back. Pointing my toes out and doing goblet squats and ensuring and making sure that I have my back straight. So when I've had the bar before, I come down and then I'm coming down a little bit forward, which I really shouldn't do, sometimes a little more forward than I should. But this time I'm keeping my back straight, using the pain or lack of pain as a guide to what I'm doing. And I started with 5 pounds, 10 pounds, and I started doing more reps. In fact, I'm doing 20 reps. So after the 10 pounds, I went to 15 pounds. And I did about 4 sets in all. My legs are feeling it, so good enough. Calling it right there. What I'm going to do the rest of the week, okay, again, today's Sunday. Tuesday, I may do a Zwift Crits, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But I was saying earlier in other videos that typically I won't do 2 hard days in a row, and I'm not going to do 2 hard days in a row, but I have a 4-day block. I'm off Thursday because of Thanksgiving and Friday because of Thanksgiving, so I'm going to go ride, and I'm going to ride only if it benefits me. So a number of us may get together early Thursday morning just for a jaunt, and that'll be more of an endurance ride for me. And then Friday, I may do another endurance ride, or I may do some sweet spot work, or a combination. Then after that, I'll restart my sweet spot block again. And I will be doing the sweet spot all the way through December this time. And then I will look at doing some over-unders starting in January. First race is going to be mid-February. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. If you think what I'm doing is stupid, if it's a good idea, any thoughts that you have. Remember, as always, because it's good for the channel, comment, like, subscribe. The Cycling Greek.